Dear Argentinians, I'm pleased to address you with news that many of us have been waiting for a long time. A few hours ago, the Ministry of Economy of the nation and the Central Bank of the Republic of Argentina have finished breaking the last link in the chain that maintained our national economy, tied to the ground for 15 years. From this moment on, we have eliminated the exchanging branch of the Argentine economy forever. When I asked for the vote, I told them that I was coming to fix the root of the economy, without shortcuts or gradualism, under the premise that a healthy and sustainable economy has three foundations: tax order, monetary order, and exchange order. After a hard first year of work, today we can conclude the process of Argentine macroeconomic sanitation. Having brought order to these three fundamental pillars, that is why I would like to thank you first for having the courage to change the course of your destiny as Argentinians. And thank you even more for having gone through the turbulence that we have gone through during this almost year and a half that we have been in as a government in the way that you have done. I also want to thank those actors of political leadership who did understand the process of change that we are living through without mischief or conditioning. For example, those 87 heroes who defended the fiscal superiority, defending the bets that we were forced to make to stop the populist demagoguery of some others. Without distinction of political colors, each of the 46 million Argentinians who live on this ground had to go through a test of fire. And today, with great pride, we can look back and say that we have overcome it. They had the courage to choose freedom over servitude. And so they abandoned the slow agony in which we were stuck for almost 15 years. To pass the bitter drink once and for all, knowing that it would be definitive. This was not a whim on our part, but a necessary step to correct decades of economic chaos that brought us to December 10, 2023. Thus, we went from being the worst student in the world in economic matters to doing our homework and becoming the exemplary student. First, we passed the fiscal exam. We went from more than 100 years of chronic fiscal deficit to being one of the 5 countries in the world that only spend what they collect, and not a single penny more. Secondly, we passed the monetary exam. We went from being a country with uncontrolled inflation for decades to the point that we destroyed 5 monetary signs, having put a stop to the amount of money emitted, which has caused the inflation rate to fall between 10 and 25 times, depending on the price index of the consumer or the highest price index, which made us see an appreciation of unprecedented weight, with its consequent fall in poverty. And thirdly, we were able to get the last stone that inflicted a deep pain on us. We got rid of the changeable seed, which was an aberration that should never have existed. A few minutes ago, the International Monetary Fund announced an unprecedented program for Argentina that will play an important role in making this possible. I say unprecedented because it is the first time in history that the IMF approves a program that is not to finance the transition from a disordered macroeconomy to an ordered one, but to support an economic plan that has already yielded its fruits. For this vote of confidence, I want to thank the entire board of the International Monetary Fund, and especially Kristalina Georgieva, the president of the organization. Historically, the International Monetary Fund programs were designed to finance fiscal imbalance due to the impossibility of getting funding in the capital market. At the same time, fiscal correction was always carried out through tax increases. However, with us, this changed. Not only did we put the tax accounts in order in record time, but also almost the entirety of the adjustment fell on the state and not on the Argentinians. This program, between the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the ID, and a repo of the central bank, rises to $32 billion, of which 19,600 million will be immediately repaid. In this way, for the month of May, the gross reserves of the central bank will be around $50 billion. With this level of reserves, we can safely support all the existing weights of our economy, providing more monetary security to our citizens, To explain this, the central bank, like any other agent in the economy, has a patrimonial balance. His accounting identity indicates that the net patrimony of the same is given by the difference between its assets and passives. The assets of the central bank are composed of international reserves and public assets issued by the national government. As for the passive, that we find the monetary base. That is the money that is in the hands of individuals and banks, such as mortgages and the remunerated debt, the famous lobacks. Then the elixir and then pieces. In this sense, when the passives of the central bank rise, either by emission of bases against public assets that of no market, that is, pure emissions, or by the devalue of the interests of the bases, the patrimony of the central bank deteriorates. In this way, as the net patrimony becomes increasingly negative, a higher level of prices is needed to liquefy the debts of the central bank, such that it adjusts to the real size of the assets of it. In this sense, as the Treasury is financed by placing titles without value in a central bank, the long-term price level is high, and thus increases the inflation rate in the present. Even this, it is very easy to understand why since the start of the convertibility, the price of the dollar has multiplied by 1,200 times. In the last 25 years, the policy via the central bank has stolen from the Argentines more than $100 billion. Therefore, in the face of such destruction of the asset, it should not surprise the inflationary disaster we have experienced in the last 20 years. Given that the dollar is one more price of the economy, it is almost natural that it has systematically shot up without finding a roof. The current agreement seeks to restore the asset of the central bank, and thus its patrimony, so that in this way inflation is only a bad memory of the past. Thus the money that enters the national treasury will be used to cancel its debt with the BSRE. In addition, given that these titles do not cost in parallel, the gross debt of the treasury will fall. In other words, in the coming days we will reach a level of gross reserves such that the monetary base could be rescued at exchange rate of 650 pesos, while if we take the definition of a wide monetary base, it could be done at 911 pesos. In fact, if we use the roof of the bank presented by Minister Capito, not only could the entire wide monetary base be rescued, but there would be about $15 billion left. Consequently, and taking up what I mentioned earlier, we're finally approving the exchange rate exam. We would have loved to eliminate the fastest exchange rate, but we have always told them that we would prefer to eliminate it well, and definitely by over-eliminating it quickly, and that this rush would mean that the measure was transitory, as it happened in the past. That was one of the many uncomfortable truths that we raised to society at the beginning of our mandate, and that they knew how to accept with determination and patience. It turned to be clear with something. Never in the last 120 years have we had a tax order, a monetary order and exchange order at the same time. Never. This is the first time. Therefore, to not say that you have already seen it, because this time is really different. Something was always missing. That is why every time we set out to do things right, we end up being short, and thus we end up hitting reality. The worst thing is that we got excited so many times that many Argentines became resigned and not get excited again. That is why today ends. Today we break the wheel of illusion and disenchantment, and we begin to walk forward. Because finally, for the first time in history, Argentina has a macroeconomics with all its signatures in order. This new tax, monetary and exchange reality, means two things for the country. On the one hand, that from now on there is no reason for Argentina to have self-inflicted turbulence, and secondly, that we are also in better conditions than ever to avoid external turbulence. Argentina has never been so well equipped in its economic foundations to resist tensions of the global economy. This does not make us impregnable. No country in the world is. But it means that in case something happens, we will absorb less damage than at any other time in our history, and we will recover at a faster speed. We must not underestimate this advantage with which others do not can, because today we are witnessing an important transition in how the global economy works. Not only in Argentina is history being rewritten, but also in the United States and in the rest of the world. There are tectonic plaques that are moving rapidly. After decades of stunners, the international order, as we know it, after the Second World War has ended, and exchange processes like this always involve intervals of great volatility. In this sense, in a sea of volatility, we are no longer a wooden raft adrift. We are two battleships. In fact, in the face of the possibility that the external shock is heightened, we will respond with greater fiscal adjustment, reducing public spending. Specifically, when these shocks occur, it is required that the economy improves its current account. In turn, our commitment to honor our debts is unbreakable. We must improve the trade balance. This means that domestic absorption must be lowered. However, in Argentina, this was always done by devaluing the currency, thus punishing the most vulnerable sectors. In other times, it was done by raising taxes to distribute the load of the adjustment. In our government, absorption will fall due to a reduction in the size of the state, so that the adjustment does not impact the private sector, the true engine of the economy. In this sense, to ensure deficit zero, we need a primary surplus of 1.3% of the GDP. In light of the recent international events, we have decided to raise it to 1.6%. The fiscal risk has already been eliminated. The monetary risk has already been eliminated. And now also, by eliminating the exchange risk, the foundations for stability and growth, sustained for the medium and long term, have been established. From here on, the real economy of the Argentines will improve in the framework of this stability and will grow as never before. The saving of 15 points of the GDP that the policy had previously squandered has been returned to the private sector, which will increase investment and consumption. In addition, the normalization of the Argentine macroeconomics that today culminates will necessarily imply the reduction of the country's risk and, consequently, interest rates, reducing the cost of private credit, and also increasing investment. In fact, the fiscal adjustment carried out will ensure a growth flow in the long term of 4.5%, to which we should add the structural reforms that we have implemented with the DNU 7023, the basic law on the deregulations carried out by the Ministry of Deregulation, which, added in the first year of management, add up to more than 1,700 structural reforms. In the short term, the economy will continue to grow through the recomposition of the stock of companies that have been used to protect themselves from inflation. In addition, the fall of inflation has revalued salaries in rents, improving the purchasing power of all our citizens. In turn, private credit returned, and we are seeing a sustained boom of mortgage loans of more than a year ago. At the same time, we are already transiting the path of tax reduction, becoming more competitive for our private sector. And as if all this were not enough, we are opening up to the world as we never did before. In the long time, we will grow even more, because our goal is to become the freest country in the world. For this, we will continue to reduce the total positive load, either due to the elimination of the inflationary tax or due to the reduction of direct taxes that we are facing at the hands of the tax superannuation. Finally, the normalization of the exchange markets that we are announcing today, which makes direct foreign investment possible. Even that one does not only invest where he knows that he will be able to have the result of his investment as he wishes. It will be a new engine of growth. He is, during the last 15 years, politics has put an end to investment and opened the way for public spending and monetary emissions. We did the opposite. We put an end to the state, and we have opened the way for private investment, so that investments can finally reach Argentina. For all these reasons, the recovery that we have been seeing will accelerate in the months ahead and transform into sustained growth. In these conditions, Argentina will be the country with the greatest economic growth in the next 30 years. Instead of talking about growth at Chinese rate, soon the world will talk about the Argentine growth rates. And at this rate, after a few years, Argentina will be great again. This will not happen overnight. Nothing valuable in life works like that. But yes, little by little, and with the certainty that both in the internal and external front. We have the duty to mitigate as much as possible any type of volatility in the medium term. Given the fundamentals of the program, inflation has no other destination than to collapse, because there will never be a peso emission without support again. Inflation will collapse indefinitely, despite attempts to generate instability from those who still want to stop the change. I say so because, as we have seen during the last few weeks, given the volatility and uncertainty generated by those who spread lies without any evidence, this month we have seen a disruption in the process of deflation. Unfortunately, these are the effects of the aberration of the Guzman Act, which forced us to go to Congress to ask for authorization to approve this agreement with the fund, one that does not happen in any country in the world, bound by the necessary reserve of these agreements. We had to see hardening weeks. Politicians and economists generated panic and uncertainty in the population. However, beyond the short-term victories that they can obtain, inflation has no other destination than to disappear, because inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon that occurs due to an excess in the money supply, either because the supply increases or because the demand falls, or both things happen at the same time. As our program contemplates, eliminating the peso emission without support forever, Argentine inflation sooner or later will disappear, except for the elderly. Argentinians have never seen something like this. All this means that, by clearing all the risk factors that technically complicated that the Argentinians could get ahead, we can start taking advantage as a country all the virtues and comparative advantages that we do have, all our talent, all our resources, all the capacity of cooperation. The effort and ambition of the Argentinians will now find the cause of progress, and it will no longer collide with the political obstacles. We have a diversity of ecosystems envied by practically any nation in the world. Each of these biomass represents different potential opportunities, from the cultivation of soybeans in the plains to the extraction of oil, tourism in the lakes, or mining in the mountains. We have hundreds of thousands of Argentinians distributed around the world who bear witness to Argentinian talent, occupying hierarchical positions of leading companies in the Middle East or in Europe, eager to rebuild the country that saw them born and to see their children grow in their native land. We have human capital at the first level here too. Human capital managed to become competitive globally, heavy monthly inflations that other countries did not have in decades. The same human capital that managed to overcome one of the highest tax pressures in the world. We Argentinians learned to bring water up to the rocks, and with all the macroeconomic factors against us, for some reason we are the country with the most technological unicorns per capita in the region, even with the least investment. Imagine how the wind can do us a favor. For a year we have had the region that was already attractive to us for investments of more than $200 million, of which we have already approved more than $12 billion. With capital control, there will no longer be any kind of exchange restriction for any investment, and all this potential can be unleashed. And if that were not enough, we have a firm will to become the freest country in the world. The only conclusion that can be drawn from all this is that in the coming years, Argentina will be moving forward. We will turn all our potential energy contained into kinetic energy that will lead us to become a thriving country. Because as the sacred scriptures say, the last ones will be the first ones, and Argentina, after marching for decades with the last ones, is destined to regain its place among the first ones. That is why the Argentines who work, who save, to those who are employees against the highway, to those who have a business, to those who risk capital and invest, and also to those who observe from outside. If it makes sense to bet on Argentina, I want to tell them to see all management as an ally, as a true opportunity. If the private sector is the chain that takes us to a better future, Our function is to be the ones. We remove the obstacles in the way, eliminating our regulations, taxes, and tariffs that hinder work, investment, and innovation. This train of progress is already in motion. I even encourage myself to say that it is unstoppable, for we do not want it to be a journey for a few. Its doors are and will remain open, and our ambition is that no Argentine stays outside. Men, women, young adults, in Buenos Aires, in Santa Fe, in Tierra del Fuego, and in all latitudes of the country, believers and laicos, liberals, Peronistas, radicals, it does not matter the party or creed they adhere to. It does not matter who they voted for. It does not matter if they have conspired for this government to fail. If the country grows, it will be better for all of us. It will be better for those who like our government, and for those who do not. It will also be better for them. For too long, Argentina was unjustly punished for a long list of wrong decisions by a long list of politicians. They made a big country feel small, and they made a noble people feel powerless. That will also end. All Argentines deserve much more than that, and all Argentines will finally have what we deserve. We will have a country in which getting ahead is easy for the one who does things well. We will have a country in which, with effort, with work or with talent, each one will be able to pursue their life project. And la segunda era will begin for all those who want to prosper on Argentine soil, which is deserved in the global economy as an example of freedom and prosperity. Everyone has my unbreakable promise that we will not rest a second until we achieve it. Have the tranquility that everything goes according to plan. This is the future of Argentina. This is the future of the Argentines. And this is the message that I wanted to bring to all of you today. May God bless the Argentines, and may the forces of heaven be with us. Thank you.